Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'll just assume that most of you will be somehow passionate about quality, right? I'm just curious, are there some more developers, more product managers, purely Scrum Masters in here? Quick raise of hand. Okay, but mostly quality enthusiasts. I like it. Very nice. So let's talk about building a high quality product. But what is quality? Let's talk about a product that we all know. Let's talk about a muffin. Don't judge me by the picture. I baked it myself just to make the point here. This is a product, and we can determine the quality by how brown it is, how tasty it looks, the size, the width, the height. But what makes this quality a really high quality product? Chocolate, right? Chocolate chunks. If you put them on top, oh, that was one too far. If you put them on top and you slice the muffin, then there is no chocolate inside, right? That's a pain. We build this product and afterwards we apply some quality. I sometimes feel this is like testing, right? We build the product, we develop it, and then afterwards we test to make it a really good quality thing. So I'm always thinking about how to get the chocolate inside. And that certainly means that I have to be involved in the baking of this product and the making of this product, because otherwise there's no chance to squeeze it in afterwards or ultimately make it an all chocolate muffin. Wouldn't this be awesome? I mean, which one? If I brought them, I did them 2 weeks ago, so they would be dull by now. But if I brought them here, which one would you have preferred? The very first one or the very last one? So let's see how we can get the chocolate inside the muffin. And let's acknowledge once more that testing does not improve quality. Why not? Let's take a look at this picture here. It's a cheesy wallpaper, but it tells a story. There's a dragon testing a car, right? Just like we are testing software, just a bit different. This car can melt. This car can, totally deteriorate. This car can be in a shit state afterwards, and you know in what ways it broke. But do you think that there's any way that the quality of this car improves here? No. If you're testing a system, no matter if it's software testing or anything else or science, if you have a system that you're testing, you try to isolate the system so that this system doesn't change. Do you want to do you want to test a changing system? Do you want to test while it's being deployed and change and change? No, this is a pain. If you find a bug, you don't know what version it was or not. So you don't want the system you're testing to change while you're testing it. That means the system does not improve, and it doesn't improve in quality while testing. It only improves once you take all the results from the testing to someone else to work on the product all over. And then in the next iteration, with bug fixes and user experience improvements, the product will improve, right? So if we want to come from here to here, from no chocolate inside to chocolate inside, let's see what we have to do. And I will guide you through 4 different areas and give you some inspiration, hopefully, of how you can be involved in the baking of the quality. So I'll talk about the process, the engineering, the business, and finally the team. I'll start with the most boring one, the process. Optimizing the process for quality. So what is the process that we typically look at? There's something like an analysis going on, then stories move to a backlog, which is very often a sprint backlog if you're somehow in Scrum. Some people start to work on this story and implement it. They are ready to be tested. They are actually in QA and they are being tested. And then at some point you're done, right? I hope most of you are mostly familiar with something like this. If you find now in this last but one state a defect, it goes all the way back, right? You have to, basically you are starting then to analyze the root cause and the possible fix, and only then you can carry it forward again so that it's fixed. So this entire process marks our time to market, not only for the features that the business people care about. I care about that we solve bugs as fast as possible, especially if they're critical, right? So I'm highly motivated to optimize that time for market so that I don't need some fancy emergency protocol for critical bugs, so that I can just go in the normal flow and in the normal process and everything is relaxed. There's some seats still available here. If you want to walk in, don't hesitate. So let's have a look how we can optimize that time to market, how we can reduce it. what is going on here? In the analysis, we plan value. We plan to deliver some new value, or we as a team. And then we are wasting time. So a backlog is a place where stories just lie around. And if you're doing, for example, Scrum, and you have a 2-week iteration, and there's always some story you pick up last, that story is lying around for 2 weeks. And nothing is happening to the story. That means in the best case, it's still up to date. But that's just the best case. So the stories will have old information once you start. And then you are actually adding the value. And then, you guess right, you're wasting time again. The development team is throwing the story somewhere and it's waiting until somebody has the time to pick it up, some tester. And then we check for the value that we wanted to deliver, and then finally we are somehow done and deliver that value, right? So in this picture, I could state it's very easy to start reducing this waste. And boom, my time to market is already reduced. As a tester, I have some leverage on my columns, which are ready for QA and in QA, so I can always say, I don't need the ready for column, just call me in whenever there is something finished. And then this column is already gone. It's a bit more complicated for the one in between here, and to be super honest, I never managed to get rid of it entirely, but we try to have only 1 or 2 or maximum 3 stories lying there so that I can be sure that whatever we work on is still up to date and has the newest requirements. Then I do usually, as a QA, something yet different to this process. I introduce limits, work in progress limits. I want my team to do less things at the same time. Why do I want to do that? Because if they do too many things at the same time, this is what happens, right? This is too many things in progress at the very same time. If you have a critical situation here, what is a bug fix that needs to go through our process would be maybe some ambulance car, and there's no way that this car, this ambulance, can move fast through this flow. What I rather want to have is a flow of things, because if there's some issue, it doesn't affect the entire thing, and all the things an ambulance car could rush through here very quickly. And I compare critical bug fixes to an ambulance in this picture. So try to work on fewer things in order to achieve more. It also helps you to focus. So you will deliver, or humans usually deliver better quality when they focus on things. When they are like messed up and all over the place, they can't really deliver in high quality. So do fewer things, do them properly, and automatically you have bigger quality. And you will still test, but you can be sure that what you test is of higher quality already. Is this a true story, or am I only telling some stories? Do you know Metro Makro? I don't know what it is in Lithuania. It's a wholesale giant from Germany that caters and delivers to restaurants and so on. Food mostly. And we were working there on the team, and it's I think it's Jira. It's the average cycle time. So the time a single story needs to move through our wall. And in the first month it was somewhere a bit more than 5 days, and then it got more and more, and we were here more than 10 days for a single story. That basically means 2 weeks. 2 weeks for a single story to be started and delivered is way too much. So we introduced work in progress limits. And whoops, the time we needed to finish the single story decreased significantly. The time we need to deliver a bug fix decreases significantly. So I can react quicker to problems that I have with my software. Very nice. If you do it once, it can be a coincidence. So we tried it again on a different project in Berlin, where I was staffed in the last year. And we agreed to deliver some scope for some fancy event that was going on by September. So there was a very hard deadline, and we know exactly what scope we had to deliver in terms of how many stories. And we counted the stories that we actually delivered, and counted up and up and up. It's basically a burn-up chart. It's not on complexity points or something like this, just the stories that we did. And so we got to some, after the initial setup, we got to some velocity, and it wasn't hard to predict that we probably wouldn't make the deadline, right? And what is the first thing that people tend to do? Reduce quality, right? We have to deliver this scope. We only have this time, and we probably have a fixed budget. What is the variable to play with? Reduce quality. If you introduce work in progress limits, if you focus better on fewer things and get them done faster, We tried this again. What happens? We increased our speed. We didn't have to compromise on quality. We delivered over the scope in the quality we wanted for. So I didn't have to have this disappointing moment where people come and say, we don't have time for quality anymore. That was very convenient. So much for the process. So let's get involved with engineering, with actual engineering. Because now that we got rid of those columns, if I'm really involved with engineering, and I know what they do, and I know what they deliver, I have to test less. So what do? When I engage with new teams, I try to establish this rule. Ship every single commit to production. I want my team to ship every commit to production. I want my team to be able to do that. And when we start this discussion, it's usually the developers who come then and say, but wait, what about the quality? Who tested that stuff? How can we make sure that everything works? So by suggesting this, I make them ask the question that I usually ask. And then we can think about it from a very different perspective. And we start talking about how they write the test, how we can do automation. When is the right time to do exploratory testing in this field? And there's another rule that we apply. It's forward only, no more rollback strategies. If my process is fast enough, and this is what I'm talking about here, I don't need rollback strategies because I can always fix forward. And this is a strategy I've been running now for 3 years across very different teams, and we never had a problem with bug fixes or a deadlock situation in production. So an example I'm lucky enough to work with these fancy nowadays microservice architecture, but it doesn't matter. Even whatever architecture you have, there are always some simplified images of you have some databases and some services and some external dependencies, and then in the end it's all assembled. In reality, it probably looks rather like this. And this can be single microservices with single responsibilities, or it can be a service domain inside your code. It doesn't matter. It's just so many very different things talking to each other somehow. And if I don't fully get the picture, what people often tend to do is to throw a thick layer of end-to-end tests on it. The most expensive one, the hardest to maintain, the most complicated one. Did I mention the most expensive? Yes. So what can you do instead? Don't do that. What can you do instead? Look at this and look at the individual units here. You don't have to look into the code. Don't get me wrong. Just understand what a search is doing or what some information is doing. And make sure that those units are tested. Don't do it yourself because your developers already engaged you and ask, how can we make sure everything is working? You say, you just have to write the test. And then they say, okay, where do we have to write the test? And then you try to figure it out. Test those units. Then you test the interaction between those units. And if you're sure this all works, then you can add a thin layer of end-to-end test. And in the last 2 years that I've been working, this thin layer was so thin that we had no end-to-end test even. And we didn't run into problems because of that. We ran into all kinds of problems, but not that kind of problem. I'm advocating for nothing but the testing pyramid. Having a lot of tests around the smallest units, make sure they interact with each other properly, and then put some little thing on top just to make sure everything comes together as you planned. There's always need for exploratory testing, in my opinion, because automation only makes sure you have no regression. So just make sure it didn't get worse. But how about these really weird edge case thingies that you want to find? I think you always have to do it, but if you really deploy every commit, and if it's mostly regression tested, it's not necessary to do it on every single individual story and check it off before it goes live. You do it on demand, by gut feeling, when you have the time. When people ask you, so many developers these days come and ask me and say, hey, this story is mostly done, all the paths that we defined are tested, but we feel it would be good because it's really complex if somebody else had a look. And this is the exploratory testing that I can still do, or that I am still doing. One of the prerequisites that I didn't mention earlier to deploy every commit is to have feature toggles. So I don't want half-baked features that are part of a story or something like that to go out. So if I have a new functionality, new messaging system, I put it on a different page that is accessible to no one. I put a feature flag and I make it invisible in the front end so that people can't access it. I play 100 stories to deliver the entire messaging system, and then I flip this toggle and the old interface disappears and the new one is there. In this way, I can really make sure that we move forward and that I can test when I have the time for it. And the last thing that is really important then is monitoring, because you have to know what is going on with your application. If you don't monitor your application in production, how do you know it's there? How do you know it's alive? How do you know what's the state, where it's suffering, where it needs attention? I think it's really important to find out where you have the most errors, and it's a good idea to find out when you're going down before you do go down, so that you can react on it. So much for engineering. Oh, did it work? Did it work? All of these concepts. So I was at Otto. Otto is the 60-year-old version of Amazon in Germany, and they successfully now made this step into the internet world and caught up with Amazon. And back in 2015, we started having more and more services and engaging much more into much faster development and much faster releasing cycles. And there was a very hesitant, broader QA department that said, don't do that. So we ignored what they said. We ignored their instructions. And just to cover our ass, we started counting how many errors we had on the web page. And these are the real critical errors. Something is down, we lose money, customers can't see X, Y, Z. And then we observed how those numbers developed. Once we started, so here we started to deploy every commit. You see this little kink? And then we just went on and we deployed like hell. And the errors, they're so few, I wouldn't say they went down, but at least it didn't increase. Right? Let's settle on that. So deploying more and more helped us to deliver even faster while having less or not significantly more defects in production. I'm always claiming less, but I don't know. So this is from end of 2016. I checked back with my old colleagues from that client. They are deploying 7 times as much these days. They are in Germany sometimes compared to or told to be the German Netflix these days. So they really made a difference in the market. So now that we developed faster and in higher quality already, let's see. I have some free time because there's less to do here, because I'm making sure there's more quality already being baked into the product. So maybe I use this free time to engage with business and talk to the PM or PO or BA or whatever this role is called. And what I care about is the value that we deliver. There's Gerard Weinberg said quality is a value to some person. The truth is sometimes quality is just a value to some important person. And maybe you know the hippo that is sometimes in the room, the highest paid person's opinion that counts the most in a meeting. So it's not about what value we bring to our user, but what the CEO wants or what the chief product owner wants or whatever. I always try to be one person in favor of the user against those people, and really always ask the question, just reiterate and reiterate and reiterate on the question, do we bring value to our users, or do we just have some management decision on what we want to build next? I think quality people are a special kind of people who can ask this question specifically good, because this meeting for me is just another system that I'm observing. And I'm used to observe a system and find the defects in this system. So if there's a system that is called meeting, and there's a defect that is basically people agreeing on stupid stuff because some hippo told them to, then I can call this out just like any other defects. This is always how I feel. And this is how I engage with business then. But I also engage in story writing in the very beginning, right? If I'm involved in story writing, we get a very clear scope of every single story, clear acceptance criteria, and in the acceptance criteria, I can already consider edge cases. Product people or business people tend to go the happy path and write the happy path, and this is their job. They should have a vision and march forward. I'm there to make sure that everything else is covered all around them. So I sit with them and make sure that the edge cases I would only test afterwards are already considered in the beginning in the stories, so that the developers know of these edge cases and can account for them while implementing them, so that I don't have to test them again, because I know they are already accounted for and even tested maybe. So the developers have a good focus, known scope, they know my preferred edge cases that I want to have covered, and they can just go ahead. And finally, we have a happy dev, happy BA, and a happy QA on the team. If you really do this concept of increasing the quality, improving the quality in the beginning, enables you to do faster development, because you don't find defects late, you don't go through these long feedback cycles that I showed you in the beginning. You shorten them so very much that you don't waste so much time on them. And you can use this time to develop even more, even faster, in even better quality. So this, in my opinion, is a really, really good business advantage of building a high-quality product. If you want to learn more about this, there's another there's another talk later by me and my colleague Nina, who is a business person, just before the closing keynote. So we will go into much more detail in this specific area if you're interested. So we went across the engineering and the business. And let's look at the entire team setup now. Why? I want to squeeze this, right? This is the process. I want to make it even faster now, because this is still the time I need to deliver a critical bug fix. So whatever test concepts I come up with, whatever stupid test pyramid, layers of end-to-end tests and so on, some things will escape us, and there will always be critical things in production. Always. There's no way to prevent that. So I want to be able to react as fast as possible. I try to squeeze this now out a bit by fine-tuning the team. And maybe the team is just another kind of a system that I can analyze and observe to some extent, without going too deep in psychology. So you're the experts on mistakes that happen. So I say help your team to do mistakes in a safe way. There are different kind of mistakes, and you do them intentionally, with very high intention or with very low intention. Anyway, there's some learning opportunity for every mistake, and it only ranges from high to higher. There's no low learning opportunity for mistakes. So let's start over here. Low intentionally and not the highest learning opportunity is a sloppy mistake. Typos, just missing some arguments in a function. Some of these small things. And they just happen. I think many people say that those are the errors that are not supposed to happen, but they do happen. And I've never seen anyone, any human in the world, who doesn't do a mistake once in a while. So I think it's unrealistic to say that we can eliminate this kind of error. We should rather deal with it. The way we deal with it is to work in pairs. So 2 developers, 1 keyboard, 1 screen, 2 opinions of what we need to do, and 1 implementation. And if there's some typo, it's fixed immediately, right? In the very moment where it appears. Then there are these aha moment mistakes where you really learned something from anything you did. And we also try to avoid or try to have these aha moment mistakes as early as possible in pairs. It's, for example, if you have a very experienced person working with a very unexperienced person. The unexperienced person could just do some minor coding at best, because not so experienced, doesn't know what is going on. But if there's a very experienced person, they can meet somewhere in the middle and deliver much more code, much faster. And the person with the lower skills or with lesser skills will learn so very much and say, this is how it works. You just showed me how it works. I didn't have to read these 15 blog posts to understand it. And the higher level person, if you explain something, I mean, there are 3 ways of understanding something. The first level of understanding is you read or hear something and say, yeah, understood. And then the second thing is that you reiterate on it for yourself and see if you really understood and can tell the story to yourself. And then the third level of understanding is when you actually teach it to someone else. I don't know if you or how much of it you experience, but then you really have to get your shit together and learn what you want to teach, because people may ask all kinds of questions. So you really learn, even as a very, very senior person working with a lower person that is holding you back. I don't see that. Then there's stretch mistakes. You really try to do something, you try to achieve something new. In our terms, we are maybe trying to implement a new technology, a new search engine, a new kind of database, a new programming language, a new testing tool, you name it. We don't know if it will work out well for us, but we still want to try. So what we try to do is to make a little spike. We deliberately plan for a tiny prototype, and we deliberately plan to throw it away afterwards, because otherwise nothing lives as long and in its bad shape of quality as a spike. So we just try and timebox it on how many days we want to invest on this, trying out this new technology, and then we use it or we don't. And then there's the high stakes mistakes. So high intentionally, but not so high learning opportunity. And this is where you can call out your team and say, don't do that. This is just a bad idea. Maybe do it after work. Something that we have that supports us here is a safety net of working in test-driven development. Most of the time, 80–90% of the time, we write in the engineering department. I don't write tests. All the automation is done by the developers, so that I have more time to care about all the other things. I just convinced them by convincing them to ship every commit to production. So they are writing all the tests before they start to implement, and I always just nudge them. Did you think about the test? Can you show me the test? Can you show me the different levels of test? Do you need advice on how to write a test? I need advice on the coding and the programming language, because I have no clue how to close and open all the brackets and where to put a comma or semicolon or a point or whatever. But together we can make that happen, and so we have a very solid safety net that supports us when we fall, because we will fall. And remember, there are no mistakes, there are only lessons to be learned. The last few things about the team. In my opinion, it's very important to have diversity and inclusiveness. This is a real picture of a real team I worked with, and in the picture you see only developers. And you see only one white male developers, and the rest is different from that. Why is that awesome? Because if you have so very many different people, and it was a former gardener, it was a former yoga teacher, it was a psychologist, those people, when they thought about a problem statement, which is what we basically get as a story, a problem statement, and we should think about a solution, how we can implement something that solves this problem. So when they have this problem statement, they think about it a lot. And they have so many different perspectives and ideas, and they came up with very smart solutions to the problem, and then they implemented that in maybe 100 lines. If you have a team of only the same kind of all the same people who just agree and who just want to code, they'll take a given problem statement and start to code immediately and see how the code develops around the problem statement until it's somewhere done. And it's maybe 1,000 lines of code. And if you assume that there is an average ratio of X bugs per 100 lines, always, it means that the solution that needed 1,000 lines of implementation has 10 times as many bugs than the solution that is only 100 lines, because the solution is much smarter. Therefore, I always want a very diverse team and not a stupid, one-minded, one-perspective team. Another thing that I want the right skills. It doesn't help me to have awesome front-end developers when we're only developing back-end. I think this is pretty obvious, but it's hard to call that out, right? You don't want to push people out of your team or people out of the place where they are. But again, we are the people who are best suited to analyze a system, find what is going wrong there, and call that out. That is our job for the software, and I think we can also call that out in the team. Not against the person, just against the skills in combination with what we need on the project. And then the last thing, most important, have fun. Does this have something to do with quality? Yes, totally. Why? Imagine you're funding some fancy startup tomorrow and I give you 2 million euros and for whatever fancy idea you came up with this morning. And you take this 1 or 2 million euros and I give you the opportunity to work with either of those two teams. Which one, I mean, they are all thought workers, right? It's a fake picture, but you get what I mean. Which team will deliver the better quality product? This team, right? I bring chocolate to the stand-up for every story that is done. Awesome. I put little post-its on the computer of people if they did a good job and say, good job. And they are so happy and they are so engaged. And we are already in a better relationship and we can talk about all the other things in a better way. So make sure that your team is happy and that you have fun, and for your own sake. Summary. Let's go through it once more. First, the process. Optimize the time to market, because it's not only the time to market for features, it's also the time for market for bugs. Reduce waste in your process, reduce the moments where stories and maybe code is just lying around and deteriorating. Make sure that QA is not the last step, or not only the last step, that it's in so many ways already considered earlier. And introduce those work in progress limits, which is saying nothing but focus more on what you're doing today so that you can finish it today and start the next thing tomorrow, instead of carrying 3 things through the week where you can't really finish anything. Engineering. That's an easy claim, huh? Deploy every commit to production, easy peasy. Start to work in this direction. It's a journey of, I think in the case of Otto, it was a journey of 1.5 years from the point where we decided we tried to go there until we actually were there. Adhere to the testing pyramid, at least as long as you're working with standard web application, with standard backend systems. I'm not entirely sure, still thinking about the testing pyramids for tiniest smartphone apps. I don't know if you have to test all the backend functionality there, if it's just a few clicks on a touch device that we can't probably automate, and so on. Introduce feature toggles. It's a very nice concept. If I deploy and deploy and deploy and deploy all the time, every day, all the time, every day, and then at some point I see that the feature I've been working on the last weeks is finally finished, and I just flip a toggle. Maybe there's even a UI for our product owner, and we tell, hey, product owner, it's finally finished. Do you want to release this feature to production right now? Because we don't need deployments for that. This is like super, and they come and they say yes, and they click the button. And then you see the error rate all go up, and you say, shit, we missed something. So you switch it off. It has just been 3 users. And you're done already. No rollback needed. No mess up in the database because you forgot that you are not that you can't roll back on the current migration. And do the QA in production then. Actually measure those errors. Be aware of when something is going on or happening there. And then you have time to talk to business. What is the value of quality for our user? Why should we care? Maybe we don't, because the people don't care because they are from some crazy village where I don't know what. So get involved early to write clear requirements for the people. To have all the edge cases accounted for from the very beginning, to be faster in development and to have less of these loops where I say afterwards, I knew from the beginning that you wouldn't cover this edge case. Now I found it, now I proved it, so here you go, please fix it. This is, I mean, a waste of time, right? If you tell them before, they can make care to cover it. It's not like people want to, I hope it's not like people want to deliver a shitty product. And then the team. Be inclusive and call out for diversity. Being inclusive is something different than being diverse. Maybe look it up, it's a really interesting topic as well. May cover another talk, but not today. Make sure that you learn from mistakes and mitigate their risk, right? If you deliberately do mistakes, there's also always some risk connected to them, so mitigate that risk by having test-driven development, by doing spikes, by pairing on very, very complicated things. And I think pairing is not restricted to 2 people, so we had very good experiences on extremely complicated problems where we sat with all the entire team, I think the entire team but business, in one room, one screen, one projector, and one computer, and one person was typing and 7 people were thinking about what the best implementation would be for this really hard problem statement. and have fun. Have fun to deliver a higher quality product. And then you can be better, faster, and stronger. Thank you very much.